Sydney is Australia's largest city, with a population of 5.1 million and a growth rate of 2% per year. With an ever-increasing population size comes rapid urban sprawl. In 2016, the New South Wales government stated that almost 200,000 new homes were to be built within the Sydney region. This accelerated expansion of housing has led to the disappearance of many of the Sydney's wildlife habitats. A loss or reduction of habitats interrupts the behavioral patterns of a species, and to investigate this further, we decided to conduct a study on ducks. More specifically, we wanted to determine whether hardhead ducks along the urban-rural gradient differ in their neophobic tendencies when approached by a human. But before we delve deeper into our research, here's some background information on the effect of urbanization on the composition and distribution of birds. Albahoy and Amoran in 2017 conducted a study on the effects of urbanization on the avian community in a southern Brazilian city and found that the composition and distribution of birds are determined by a species' tolerance and ability to exploit the resources an urbanized area provides. McKinney found while researching into impacts of urbanization on native species that birds can be grouped into two categories: urban avoiders and urban exploiters. Urban avoiders are birds considered to be sensitive to disturbance, whereas birds that can reside in urban communities are urban exploiters. Hardhead ducks are considered urban exploiters, hence they are an ideal species to examine for our study. Moeller, while studying behavioral and ecological predators of urbanization, found that urbanization affects the physiology, morphology, behavior, and life history of bird species. Correspondingly, Cardillini and colleagues in the study titled Surviving in Sprawling Suburbs found that birds exhibited changes in their tolerance of human proximity and anti-predator mechanisms. Hence, before we conducted our research, we hypothesized that birds in highly urbanized areas will exhibit more boldness and risk-taking behaviors due to their exposure to the hazards associated with urbanized areas.
Before we dive into our methodology and research findings, here's a few facts about hardhead ducks. They are an endemic species to Australia and for the most part found on the east coast of Australia, but they are occasionally seen in New Guinea and other surrounding islands. Hardheads are found in freshwater wetlands and tend to roost on low branches and stumps near the water. They prefer deep, fresh, open water and densely vegetated wetlands for breeding. They are a widely dispersed species and population numbers tend to erupt after long bouts of rain. However, numbers have declined in some areas due to the draining of freshwater wetlands or the diversion of water for irrigation.
Before we explain our methodology, you need to know what flight initiation distance is, or FID for short. Flight is considered any form of escape. This can either be on wind, on foot, swimming, or climbing away. Flight is an anti-predatory response, and hence FID is used to measure the willingness of an animal to take various risks. Now, as you can see at the moment, the roles can be reversed, demonstrated by these various children fleeing from their pet roosters. Now on to the methodology. Firstly, we chose two locations, one being Victoria Park, located on the corner of Parramatta Road and City Road, which are two main thoroughfares in and out of the city. And the second more remote location we chose was Surveys Creek Lake, and that's just south of Penrith. We then collected all the materials we needed, which included a container, birdseed. Oh, and just a sidebar, don't feed bread to birds, it's super bad for their gut health. Anyway, a timer, which we just used our phones for, a metronome, which we also used our phones for, and a measuring tape. After locating a paddling of ducks, we placed the birdseed nearby. Once the ducks were feeding, one of us would walk towards the duck at 125 beats per minute. We measured this pace using the metronome. As soon as the bird moves away from the bowl, we stopped walking, and our partner recorded the distance between us and the birdseed using a measuring tape. This distance is then used to calculate the flight initiation distance. And we repeated this method over and over again. and for the most part it worked smoothly, but we did experience some troubles along the way.
I really hope they're not going to chase away the ducks.
We could only get data from 2 sites unfortunately, as the weather prevented us from doing anything else. 10 replicates were used in the same area to increase accuracy, but even so we had 1 outlier in our urban results. This could have arisen due to being too loud and cracking sticks with our shoes, which was noted to scare the ducks more readily. What we found was really interesting. Birds in our rural site were flying away at a much greater distance than urban birds, at 9.9 meters to 3.1 meters respectively. So we saw over a 6 meter difference in bird FID. Our null hypothesis was that the FID between the 2 populations would be equal. Clearly this didn't happen. Instead, our alternative hypothesis was observed, and our results correlate with our original hypothesis. Birds in urban areas exhibited more boldness and braveness in comparison to their rural counterparts. Our data found met the conditions for an independent 2-sample t-test for difference in means. The data collected was collected at random, as in ducks weren't specifically picked out, it was just whatever duck came to the shore. Our data collected were independent of each other. One did not influence the other's sites or other ducks' results. Variance is assumed to be equal, and our data was found to be normal. Separate species of pigeons and seagulls would often interfere with the experiment by stealing birdseed from the container on the floor. While this was a hindrance in collecting results, we noticed the presence of the pigeons and seagulls surrounding us also attracted ducks to us, even if they were on the opposite side of the pond bank. This indicates the urban duck's ability to rely on other species to point out notable sources of food, as well as less dangerous prospects in getting it. This also demonstrated from the beginning that ducks saw humans as not an immediate threat when prospecting for food. Finally, when testing for rural data, joggers and residents walking dogs scared away many of the ducks we were trying to test. Again, this could have influenced results, as the subjects would have been on high alert due to the loud noise and running of the dogs and people.
In conclusion, our hypothesis turned out to be on the right track, as our results showed a definite increase in FID of ducks living in rural areas in comparison to duck populations living in more populated urban areas. While there were some outliers in both of our areas of interest, we were able to chalk them up to minor and often natural inconveniences, such as the weather, other species of birds, like pigeons and seagulls interfering, and human error such as accidentally startling the birds by stepping on twigs. However, at the end of the day, we are certain our results align with the previously mentioned theory of urban avoiders and urban exploiters.
It's important that we endeavour to study the effects urbanisation has on our wildlife's behaviour, as it provides us with the tools needed to mitigate the negative consequences of our industrial actions and protect our wildlife.